I want to talk a bit about HTML5 right now and about the changes that happen in HTML5, because a lot of the confusion that we had about what is HTML5 and what is supported is not actually, it's a bit detrimental to the cause. So I've been talking about HTML5 since more or less its inception. I've been a web developer for now 18 years, something like that, 1996 for my first big website, an intranet back then. And I've been going through a lot of terrible browsers, a lot of bad environments, a lot of interesting setups. And it was fascinating to me when HTML5 came around and we wanted to change something, to make something new. And then we completely messed it up by promising far too many things far too early. And I just found it interesting in the Q&A of the talk before when there was the sentence, "It is so easy, even a web developer can do it." And I get rather angry when I hear this, because I remember having to fight the Java guys in like 1994, 1995 about like, oh, the web thing will never be something. And anybody who says that a web developer can do something and it's easy, do some CSS layouts across browsers and then we talk again. So what is HTML5? What is the main difference to HTML4 or HTML 3.2, HTML 4.01 and all the funny numbering that the W3C did back then? In essence, it's just from documents to apps. The web in its native form was just texts with underlined words where you can click on them when you go to other texts. And nowadays, when you see like connected houses and like 3D videos and stuff, this is not amazing. But back then, it was incredible. It was just a totally new medium, totally new thing, worldwide, connecting with each other without having to dial new telephone numbers. And then out of a sudden we realized people want apps, we need to do things. So what is the difference between a document and an app? And to me it's a read things to do things. In the past we had websites, and websites were showing you content, you could read things, you could click through something, maybe you can buy something. But then we realized people want to use the web to create more and more. This could be uploading an image, this could be just writing a text, but this could be filing your taxes, this could be finding out something about what's going on around you, maps, these kind of things. And then out of a sudden the HTML4 stack wasn't good enough anymore, and we needed new functionality. And these new and exciting features were actually quite interesting, what we came up with, because we looked at what other technologies gave us, like Flash, Silverlight, Java, all the things that we did before. And one of the main things we wanted to have is natively supported video and audio. And this is what HTML5 gave us. Out of a sudden, a video element was just like a paragraph or a div element. I can rotate the thing, I can hide it, I can stack them, I can do interesting things with it. Painting and image manipulation was a big thing as well. Like in the past, when I wanted to do some painting, I needed to have a Flash video in there or a Java applet. And out of a sudden with Canvas, I had an element that was made to be a blank canvas and do something with it and paint with it. Offline functionality became important as well out of a sudden. We have these massively powerful machines in our pockets out of a sudden. I mean, this thing had about like more cores and more power than my first 10 PCs had back then. And we didn't use it. And there is a big lie that people think we're online all the time, but I'm going to come back to that. Browser history handling was another problem. That started with Flash, and then with Ajax we had the same problem. Out of a sudden we had single pages that just loaded once and didn't go from page to page. So when somebody hit the back button, which they always do when something goes wrong, out of a sudden everything was gone. So we had to find a way to handle that. Then we had richer form controls, ranges, color pickers, autocomplete, list boxes. All of these things you had even in Swift and other things before, and on the web just did not exist. It was just input boxes and check boxes and radio buttons really. And simpler DOM access was another big thing as well. Libraries like jQuery became successful because the DOM was kind of a mess and sometimes hard to understand for somebody who's not a web developer. But the basics stayed the same, and the basics still should stay the same, and we keep forgetting those. It should be interoperable and independent of hardware and browser. HTML5 does not expect a certain browser or a certain hardware. And that's great. That's a wonderful thing. It should be open standards based. Not one company should say like, this is HTML5 and we have a different HTML5 than you have. Because that's craziness. That's when I had to build for Internet Explorer 4 and for Netscape 2 different versions of the same website. And nowadays it seems crazy looking at these things, but we do the same mistakes again. It should be backwards compatible with the opportunity to reuse proven best practices. So in HTML5, we didn't want to replace HTML. We just wanted to enhance it. We wanted to put something new in there. XHTML2 would have been a complete replacement of HTML. And that was, again, craziness. That was not a good idea. We have millions of developers out there. They should not have to relearn something. And it should be simple and forgiving. The parser fixes a slight markup issue for you. When you don't close a p tag, the browser closes the p tag for you. In XHTML or XML-based languages, if you don't close it, the thing will show an error message, and the end user thinks they've done something wrong. And that's never a good user experience. So why is there still a fear of HTML? Why do people don't just jump into it and everyone's like, oh, well, I'd rather buy an iOS app and build an Android app and build one for that and that platform rather than HTML5? I think the biggest problem is that we tried to oversell it. At the beginning, HTML5 was a big thing that Apple talked about. The iPhone was the first big HTML5 thing. Flash is dead, HTML5 is the one thing. So instead of telling people about the evolution of documents to apps, we showed them shiny things, and we gave them the 3D HTML. You might remember all these like, oh, here's a cube with a video on each side. And every bank that I work with wants to have that. Like in job interviews, like, can you make a video cube? Like, no, it's never happening. But this is what we showed people. We always go with new technologies, and the first thing we build is like games, 3D environments, lots of video and audio stuff to show how we can push the platform before we actually show the things that really, really are needed by you, like things like offline functionality. Then we made the mistake that out of a sudden it became a browser game. And we had that in the past. This page is best viewed with Internet Explorer. And these websites are still out there. You still have to have a virtual machine on your Mac to show something from time to time, to use a ticket booking system or room booking system in a company. And this is because in 1997, 1999, people made that mistake of writing everything for one browser. And then we made the same mistake with Safari. And then we made the same mistake with Chrome. And then we made the same mistake with Firefox. HTML5 is for all these browsers, not only for one. So let's not make that mistake again. And then, of course, the big thing about HTML5, as iPhone was the first thing that really supported, it's a mobile thing. That's the successful businessman from the 80s there with a great mobile phone that had like a 5-minute battery life or something and fried his brain at the same time. But this is still happening. You have a lot of frameworks in HTML5 or CSS frameworks that says they're HTML5 compliant, whatever that means. And then they build websites like that. That was a conference I was in the other day where it's like, oh, we got an HTML5 app, and I loved that. I spoke at 42 conferences in 27 countries last year. Every single conference gave me an Android app. Do I want to have 27 apps on my phone that basically 2 days later I don't ever need anymore? Most of the time they have a language they don't understand. So I'm like, yay, they used HTML5. And then it looked like this on my desktop. And I'm like, yeah, great, 1400 pixels. Like this little arrow was the thing that is interactive, the rest wasn't. So it's not only for mobile, it's for everything. It's just an extension of the web into an app space. So the other thing, of course, there was this, if you look closely, everything is broken style of reporting. A lot of articles have been written of experimental technology that were just in the browser 2 days ago, and then like, oh, I looked at it, it's broken, it's terrible, this will never work. And the tech press loved this kind of stuff, because they always wanted to say that HTML5 isn't working, and the whole web versus native fight made for good headlines. It always cracks me up when a tech outlet says HTML5 is dead, and their only business model is actually showing you ads on a website. So, okay, so you don't like the web, but that's the thing that actually keeps you alive, fair enough. But a lot of these articles keep getting repeated, and people even don't look at the date anymore. What was broken in 2012 is probably not broken anymore. So take a look at those with like, before you quote, like Zuckerberg doesn't like HTML5. He actually likes it. If you read the article properly, the interview properly back then, it was about a framework that Facebook built. Then, of course, it was never an official standard. HTML3.2, HTML4.1, HTML4.0, they were all standards by the W3C. So if you work in an environment like a bank or insurance company where you have to have every your software licensed, you could use those. HTML5 you could not, because that's just these crazy engineering types that come up with random stuff that nobody wants to use. And it was a problem. And then, of course, we ran into this keeping ourselves clever and occupied cycle. And that was now for the last 3 years probably, or actually in the last year it just broke out really, really bad. What do I mean by that? Well, HTML5 had worries. We did not like a few things about HTML5. First of all, oh my God, there are old browsers out there that cannot do all of that. So Internet Explorer 6 is always being mentioned, and my clients cannot upgrade. So, oh, it's great that you have a canvas element, but there's no fallback for it at all. Mobile operating systems are not good at upgrading their browsers. That was the issue with the first Androids, that the Android stock browser was this Frankenstein browser thing, I don't even know what it was, and every one of them had a different one that was bolted into the operating system. And don't get me started on web views, because that's not even a browser, that's just the engine in it, and you don't even know how to replace that one. And experimental implementations differ from browser to browser and environment to environment. So you had all these like -WebKit things, -MOZ things, -MS things. And the amount of like white buttons with white background, because the only background they had was a -WebKit gradient, is amazing out there. So many things out there are just relying on something that doesn't even exist any longer. And native is always faster. That was always the big comparison as well. Like, oh, the thing that was written only for that hardware in that state of the operating system is better than the thing that was written for the future and the past. Quite an obvious thing to say, but we always compared them directly, and there's this myth that every user wants to use something, and but if it's more than 300 milliseconds, you will lose them and they will come to your house and beat you up or something like that. Anybody who's ever used a LinkedIn app knows that we have to have a lot of patience at time to time. So what did we do? We put libraries, polyfills, and frameworks in. So instead of waiting for browsers to catch up or do a test if a browser is capable of something before we gave it to it, we wrote a polyfill to give the CSS animation to the Internet Explorer 5 on a 386 machine or something like that. We never even tested on these old machines. We just made sure that they get something, and obviously it will work. We don't even want to test for that anymore. And this is how we made HTML5 fat. And this is how we made the web slow, because we put lots of JavaScript dependencies and CSS dependencies into our browsers and into our solutions for a world that we didn't even want to support anymore. Internet Explorer 6 users are not used to beauty. Don't confuse them. Don't give them something that looks gorgeous. Just give them something that works. They probably don't want to change at all. I call this the Stockholm syndrome of interfaces. You go into these companies and have this interface where it's like 6 clicks for something very simple, and then you build something simpler for them and they don't want it. Because they already planned for the 10 minutes each day where they do these 6, 7 steps. And you're like, okay, well, if you don't want it, like, when are you going on vacation? Or, no, anyways. But the web is fat. It's terrible. The average website right now is almost 2 meg with 100 different HTTP requests. And in the performance world, we talked for years and years that every single HTTP request is terrible because it's a DNS lookup, it's a connection, it's a download, it's a render, and it slows down your page. And 100 of them. I think my favorite was a smartwatch competitor, which I cannot say right now because it's a competition of this company, it would be unfair to say it. But when the website is 53 megabyte on the first download, that's pretty much not a way to sell a watch to me, I'm sorry. I'm still waiting for this. It's loading at home in my house. I think by the time I get back, it will be rendered. So how do we try to fix that? How do we try to solve that problem that the websites now are 22 megabyte and 100 things? Of course, we write more software. This was a tweet the other day, starting a basic website in 2014, install Node, install Bower, pick CSS framework, pick responsive approach, and number 47 is write some HTML. And we tell anybody that this is what professional web developers do, and if you don't do that, then you're not cool, and you can't play in the sandbox with the cool kids. You have to be at the smelly kids that used HTML 3.2. And we use abstractions to fix issues in the plumbing of the web, and then we do more abstractions to undo them, which is quite cool because it means we make our own jobs and we sound clever doing it, which is kind of amazing. But as a developer, it just drives me crazy to think about why should I do something wrong to undo it again? Sometimes it's 2 different developers doing it, but it's like there's so many new things. I remember I also like the naming, like you have like grunt and gulp. What's next? Like fart, burp. Like it's just you take any word, you put JS at the end of it, you put it in Google, you find something right now. Because every day somebody builds something clever. Some of these things are amazingly clever, but they've never been proven in real environments. They've never been actually seen as something that should be done. And all of them are open source. And as somebody who worked in open source for a long, long time, it cracks me up that people don't fork something else and fix it. Instead, they write their own thing because they didn't like one thing of the other library. And that's how we, again, keep ourselves busy. And this is how we lose the touch with the core ideas of the web and its main feature that made it the success that it is now. And that is its simplicity and an incredibly low learning curve. I was on the plane the other day, I opened my laptop open, and you always have people next to you like, oh, is that a laptop? And you're like, yeah, that's a keyboard. And she's like, oh, I want to do something with websites. Do you know something? It seems like you're doing this. And I've got my Firefox, I opened my developer tools, there's an editor in there, and I showed her in like 10 minutes on the plane how to build the first website. Because this is what's happening now. Browsers have developer tools in them, all of them. And we can build things just by writing a few lines of code and understanding the concept of code just by using the web. And there's nothing better for learning than getting something immediately by doing it. Rather than like, oh, use these 15 different libraries that you don't know what they're doing and you're not clever enough for it, and then you get something. That's not the really experience that I like as a learner. So is it time to ditch the abstractions? Should we go closer to the metal? I think so, because now for starters, HTML5 is a recommendation. So now if you work in a finance industry or in a bank, you can now say, yes, it's a recommendation, we can now use it, it's safe. Cool, fair enough. And great stuff is happening on mobile. iOS 8 Safari now has massively improved HTML5 support. And I'm really excited about what went in there, because I know a lot of people in the Safari team, and I've always felt bad that the stuff did not get into iOS, but was only on OS X. And now it's on iOS as well, and that's really good as well. You saw the Tizen browser is incredible what it does with HTML5 now. Android announced an evergreen web view. That is important, that you don't have the problem anymore that the operating system defines what browser you have or what web view you have. There's the Crossway, if you haven't talked to them earlier. This is a very interesting piece of software as well that injects a Chromium web view into older Androids. So I worked with a few banks in Norway that couldn't release their app until they had a certain security feature of newer Chromium. And the only way to release it on old phones without sending people new phones, which they didn't want to do for some reason, is that they actually use this Crossway product. And it really is nice that they do it. Firefox OS covers almost all of South America and available in Bangladesh and India. $35 phone without a contract. That's pretty awesome. And the next millions of users out there will not have a desktop computer or a laptop. They will be on a mobile device. And they will have to wait a few months before they can afford a mobile device, so they don't want one that they have to ditch away the next 2 minutes. So what's the state of play? What's going on right now? Where are we in HTML5? The things that I talked about. Native plugin-less video and audio across the board. Actually, all the browsers support it except for Opera Mini, but that's because Opera Mini is actually a cloud service. It renders HTML on their server and sends it to you on a device that can swallow just HTML. Internet Explorer 8 cannot do it, but fair enough, you can do a Flash fallback if you really want to. But my fallback to a browser that doesn't support video, a download button for the video, because every operating system has a video player on it. So why not? Basic drawing and image manipulation using Canvas, all hardware accelerated as well, across the board, works on all the browsers that we have right now. 3D drawing using WebGL is a bit all over the shop, but it's partly because it's all features of WebGL was tested in this, all OpenGL features. Not all of them are available, but there's good information what is available. The red in Android is actually a mistake here. That was a website problem that they had on the day, so sadly enough I took a screenshot back then. Offline apps using App Cache Manifest works. Not clever if your app has a lot of dynamic updates, so you might be caching things that you don't want to cache and people don't get new data. But for static assets like images or your CSS that doesn't change much, it really works. And it's wonderful to come to a website on my phone and just see it and don't have to load new things. And your traffic will be much, much less on your sites as well if you use it. Storing simple resources in web storage, which is local storage and session storage, is a key value pair. Works across all the browsers now as well. 5 megabyte you have in that one. You now have a storage API as well. You see how much storage has been used and how much is still free. And in developer tools, you can actually look into it. There's now events being fired as well. It's still synchronous. So if you put 5 meg in there, 5 meg get loaded before your page gets rendered. So use that with a bit of grain of salt. Storing larger resources, you've got IndexedDB and you've got WebSQL. So you put those two together because, of course, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, other people had different ideas what to do. But there are some abstraction libraries. There's one called Local Forage, which we're using in Firefox OS, which is really, really good for that. So you just have a key value pair and it checks what the browser can do and uses the database solution under the hood, which is available to you. Audio control and generation, that's the web audio API. There's a bit of a problem there with the support, but the important one was here that iOS Safari and Android is starting to do that as well. So the problem was on mobile devices, the audio tag, you can play, but you couldn't play a loop. And for games, of course, this is absolutely necessary. With web audio, you've got full control over the audio. You can do panning, zooming, you can change the pitch, you can generate music. And even in a 3D environment, you got 3D music, so you can walk past something, it's louder and less loud. It's really, really cool what you can do with that. So in general, things move really, really fast. And that's in London, where I live. It's a wonderful thing down in Greenwich. By the time you have read this, the Earth will have spun 1,450 meters. Things are moving fast, so please move along with us and don't just read something from 3 years ago that HTML5 doesn't work. You see in Can I Use, the website that I just have there, that what's happening. So go and try to solve real issues with technologies in browsers. Stop worrying. Try them out. If you find real bugs, tell the browser users about it. Tell the browser makers about it. It's a very important step. Because no matter what we tell ourselves, in the end, browsers are what's going on there. If they're in a web view or a browser themselves, it needs to be fixed there. So there's caniuse.com is a great example for typing anything in and say like, okay, how is that supported? How is that not supported? And these are all the charts that I came from. This is actually supported by Microsoft and other people as well. We give them the data, what's going on there. But to me as a developer, the most important thing was actually a mindset change. And I learned that because I was in terrible bad computers in the past. And I never had the what if question. A lot of people are like, oh, what if audio doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? What if the user has this old browser? As a developer, what you do is choose if what instead of what if. Just test for the thing before you apply it. It's a very simple concept. That way we will never give something to a browser that it cannot understand. Because a lot of the browser detection in the past was like Opera was really good at that at times, that it supported something with a stub. So the if statement would say, yes, it is there. But nowadays it's basically if you just test for the thing, and it falls through, then you cannot use it. And sometimes that's a good thing. Bad support in older browsers is a good opportunity for you never to have to support these browsers. Like media queries is a great example for that. Media queries allow you to do different layouts according to screen size or if it's portrait mode or landscape mode. Internet Explorer 8 doesn't support media queries. So put one media query around your whole CSS, and you never have to worry about that browser getting any of your CSS, so you don't have to worry about all the glitches and knowing this. In the past, my job as a web developer was to know how browsers mess up. With HTML5, luckily enough, the browsers all have the same parser now, so that gets much, much easier. Of course, there's still little things, but fair enough. HTML5 is not, and that's something that I wish people would repeat more once the press tells you otherwise. It's not experimental features of browsers becoming a maintenance problem. There's a lot of stuff happening in Mozilla. There's a lot of stuff happening in Chrome. There's a lot of stuff happening in Internet Explorer, in Opera, in Samsung, in Intel. Everybody does something creative with the browser and tries something new out. This is how standards are born. Browsers test things out, and you as developers should be playing with those. But don't put that into live products. I talked about the white buttons with white background earlier. That should not happen anymore. So the whole prefix enough here, please let's stop doing that. That's why most browsers now have, instead of prefixes, we have flags in the browser or a developer edition of the browser to use that instead. HTML5 is not Flash. It's not one company doing it, and you are at their mercy to do upgrades to it. It's lots of companies feeding into the process and lots of companies having a stake in it as well. And that's, I think, is a very, very important part of an open standard. And it's not limited by buggy implementations of browsers. If you encounter them, file a bug. Don't go on Twitter and complain that Firefox is stupid or Chrome is stupid. That doesn't help anybody. That just aggravates each other. And it gives people an idea that browsers are still terrible. Every browser maker wants your input and wants to have information from you. And it's easy to file a bug. Of course, it's a bit of work, but seeing that in the next version of a browser something was fixed that you complained about means you made the web better. It doesn't mean that you solved your own problem. You made it better for millions of people out there. Of course, there's still some issues we need to fix. And there will always be. That's the cool thing about being a web developer. It never stops. My biggest thing is that the future is just not flying cars and unlimited connectivity. Okay, there's cars out there that don't quite fly yet, and there's lots of connectivity here. And the wireless even worked at a conference. I was like, yay, although I'm in San Francisco, which is a third world country in terms of connectivity. But this is Her, the movie, and I loved that one because it was, first of all, a silent science fiction movie. It wasn't that robots kicking each other and stuff, but it was just like, this is what the future might be. And yeah, a lot of waiting still happened, and waiting will always happen because we cannot cheat physics. Copper wire in the ground is a thing that will not get faster unless you replace it with something else, and digging up the whole of America is not really a simple idea. And yeah, we will have problems with connectivity, with overlaying wires, with everything. So let's think about what we can do to make the web more connected. This is a picture of connected devices in the world at a certain time of day. And that's a lot of black, and that annoys me, because I've seen so many people grow by having web access, by being able to publish things, by being able to read books they downloaded, by being able to go to Khan Academy and learn something, or Coursera and these kind of things. And I wish there were more connectivity worldwide. The connectivity will not be wires in the ground anymore. This will be all about mobile. This will be all about connected devices and things like that. And the big growth is in these markets. The emerging markets is where the money lies, where the new users lie. Over here, we get tired of it. Of course, everybody buys the newest iPhone when it comes out because the neighbor has it. But in essence, we don't need it any longer. And we don't have any new users. The people are already there. And I gave a lot of talks about app economics and how many people are really downloading and paying for apps. It's not that many. Like the whole story about, ooh, you made one app and you're a millionaire tomorrow is just marketing again. But seeing how many people are waiting for good connectivity and getting it now with Android One, also with Firefox OS and with other platforms, there's a good opportunity for you there. But you have to understand that first and foremost, we need to be available offline. The more you can put on the device after the first load that doesn't have to come from the web anymore, the better. Because it's just immediately, it's fast, it's wonderful. There's a need for an offline web, but we condition people not to believe in it. I gave a TED talk the other day about social media and security, that a lot of people upload photos and don't realize that there's GPS coordinates in that photos. So I know where your picture that you were naked in the shower was taken. So I probably know where your shower is. So I wrote this thing called removephotodata.com, and you can try that out. It's just a website, a little HTML5 app, and it's completely downloading to your phone, and you can upload images to it in your phone, doesn't go to the web anywhere. You can remove the GPS data, and then you can save the photo without the GPS data, all done in JavaScript with Canvas. I tweeted about it, the first 40 answers like, oh, well, you talk about security and I have to upload my picture to your server. And you're like, no, there's no server involved. It's all happening on your phone. But there's no way to indicate to a user that this is happening. So even in UX, we cannot tell the user this thing is working offline. We just expect apps to call somewhere in the background and to do things because we're always connected. So we have to find a way to do that in terms of UX. The current tools are okay. I talked about local storage, I talked about app cache. They're not quite amazing, but they actually do the job to a degree. But we need to use them well so that people start trusting the web to be offline capable and theirs to own. And that's there to own is a big thing. Like whenever people talk about the cloud, I just call it somebody else's computer. Because that's what the cloud is. It's some computer in the corner with like sparks coming out and wires coming out of it. It's not like the magical cloud thing like in Star Wars or something. But the speed thing is really interesting. This was a test of local forage versus XHR Ajax, just loading something from the web. And on average, loading a 250K file was 787 milliseconds with Ajax on a fast connection, or it was 25 milliseconds from your index DB. And you have full control over the index DB as well. So think about using that more. Even if you're not quite aware of it, it's a very, very good way to store things in your computer. There's a great talk by Alex Feierke from Hoodie in Berlin called Offline First. And he has like in 40 minutes, really, really good explanations of what I talked about as well. There's a new standard in the making or a new solution in the making called Service Worker. This is a friend of mine from Google who's actually got a 16-minute talk, explained to you what Service Worker is, and he's got a longer talk that has the live demo showing you the code, and it's available on GitHub as well to try it out. It works 100% in Chrome now, I think 90% in Firefox. Internet Explorer is interested. Safari is also doing something. And the good thing about Service Worker is it's not only just app cache or something like that. It's a fully controllable cache solution, and it's like a router in JavaScript. So any HTTP request getting in and out you can control, and you can define your own caches that are named, and you can define the different sizes of them. So you got full HTTP control over it. Of course, we got apps and components. It's a big thing, like what is the app standard? Like HTML5 has app components and widgety things, but like what is a real packaged app on the web? What is something like an APK for the web? What does that look like? There's an overview from the W3C, and this was supposed to be a video, but the uploads here were not, it was like 50 meg, was too big. That page goes on forever. Like the W3C has all these standards that we're discussing and we're sorting out, and lots of things going on. With components, web components is a great idea because we make widgets that actually are rendered by the browser while the browser is rendering the picture, rather than our DOM and JavaScript components that work against the browser after the browser has already rendered the picture. And there's a great overview here at Future Insights, and that one is also going on and on because he talks about the web component standard, and then he talks about React.js, Polymer, 10,000 other libraries that all do the same thing to make the web component thing work right now in browsers with their own syntax. And that sounds to me familiar, because that's exactly what we did with HTML5 at the beginning. Like, oh, let's make it work right now across browsers with an abstraction layer. It's good. I mean, React has its uses. Facebook is written in it. Polymer has a lot of good stuff, like the whole HTML5 version stuff of the new material designs in Android L is done with Polymer. But think about what you're relying on and if that thing will be available in a year's time. Because, spoiler, there is no SDK or IDE or library or framework to solve all of our issues on the web. The web is moving, evolving every single day. I've probably had like 12 different job titles for the same job that I've done. I've seen so many environments come and go, and this is the cool thing about it. I would be so bored if I have to work in the same environment all the time. I used to write games on Commodore 64 and Amiga. That was cool because I knew every chip, what they did. But then nobody used these computers anymore, and out of a sudden I was like, my knowledge is gone. But with the web, I have to push myself every single day to find something new and to find something that can be standardized. So things you can do. Learn about what browsers have now. Look at Can I Use, look at state-of-the-art documentation. Try things out. Just go to the console and type random things in and find JavaScript objects that you're not quite sure what they are and play with them. Nothing can break. You cannot get killed. You cannot lose your data. It's going to be monitored on your router level anyways. So it's all good. Use developer tools and testing tools to analyze what you got. Like we make a lot of assumptions that, oh, users want that. Do user testing. Why is my app slow? There's great websites, performance tools. Adi Osmani gave a few good talks that I can send out later on as well. There's the amount of tooling, the amount of insights that we have right now. There's tools, free tools out there that you put your URL in, you pick like 12 different servers around the world, and you get videos back how long it took to render that page. How cool is that? I mean, I would have killed for that in like the 90s when I was a web developer. So oh, why it's broken, I don't know. Nowadays I know every single thing in my page. Slim it down and fix it for now, not what was promised. Fix the thing now. Use the things that are available right now, put an if statement around it, and you will be happy. Because when the browsers get better and support it as well, you don't need to do anything. And let's face it, as developers, we always get that myth of saying like, yeah, we fix that later, do it now. We have to release that thing, and I know it's terrible code, but you get then time to fix it. You could never get time to fix it because then the next feature comes along. So make sure that what you put out there right now is clever enough to not break. We need to fix the platform that is the web and not replace it. The web will not go away, I'm sorry. This is like, no matter what technology you have, sooner or later you will have to go online and do an HTTP request or an IDB request or whatever other platform is out there. It's a net thing. And this means fixing the browsers and filing bugs and complaining to the right people and telling us what's broken. Because we love fixing things that are broken if we know what they are. If you get bug reports like this doesn't look right, that's harder to fix. But saying like, oh, this button is not clickable because this is happening and this is happening, oh great, we can fix that. A lot of performance issues, a lot of issues with browsers have been because of feedback. And we need you to do that for us and to do that with us, because When I started as a web developer, browsers were these mythical things that amazing developers do that I have no idea what they are. And nowadays, we're the people working in browsers use JavaScript to write browsers, which is quite funny if you try to interview somebody for a job and they come in and only know jQuery, and you're like, no, Firefox is not written in jQuery, neither is Chrome, weirdly enough. But all is open, all is available to you. And I think the interactivity with HTML5 and how simple it is to reach something quickly is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So by all means, don't hold yourself back, play with things, and give feedback to the people that need it. And that means Tizen, these watches that we just got, is HTML5, and we're getting there. It's really, really nice that we're getting there with the platform that is worldwide, that anybody can be a developer. As a developer, I should not be the person that has to pay $100 and download 4 gig of SDK before I write my first line of code. I should be a kid in Bangladesh that has an idea and can write a text file and save it and have it in the browser. That's what made me what I am. I haven't been to university. I never finished a job education. I just found the web and I played with it, and it was good to me, and it can be good for you as well. So we're fixing the potholes of HTML5, and please help us with us. These are all the pictures that we have. Thank you very much. Apparently there's stuff of session raffles, but we don't do raffles, and I should remind you not to forget to fill out the session survey or something. Thanks very much. Any questions? Where's coffee? No.
I had a question on discovery of HTML5 applications.
Can you use the microphone? Yeah.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Discovery of HTML5.
Yeah, so like the user flow of an user with like the app you described where it removes the no-follow HTML5 app to remove my geolocation from a picture. Okay. So a flow of a user would be to look in the App Store on their phone first.
That's so the question is app discovery in HTML5. Most HTML5 apps that I know are in marketplaces are in app stores. You just don't know that they're HTML5. The end user should not have to know what it is. But in Firefox OS's case and some other platforms as well, you can install the app directly from the web as well. So if you're a newspaper, for example, and you want to push the app into people's faces like every newspaper does right now, you can have an install button instead of just having like, please download our app. As the app themselves are HTML, they could also be indexed. So a lot of services would index your HTML5 page more than your binary app. But and Google is also indexing apps now as search results. They're doing it with Android apps and with Chrome apps at the moment, but with a manifest file that is standardized, which will go in the W3C right now, we're working on that. That would be the next phase as well, that in search results you not only get like websites, but also web apps.
Cool. Thank
so
you.
If anything, it's better, because if you ever try to put something into the iOS store and get found, good luck. Or you can call the app AAAAAA or something and then hope people do it by alphabet.
How do you feel about kind of solutions like Cordova and PhoneGap that try to shoehorn HTML5 into every native platform?
Well, question was about PhoneGap and Cordova. I like them. I think the PhoneGap, the name gives it away. It was meant to be a gap solution, to fix a problem that exists right now, that HTML5 was not supported to the degree that iOS promised us and Android promised us. That's why we used PhoneGap to pack up the application to look like a native application or become a native application in some cases. And I think they're very, very useful things. And I've seen a lot of apps that I use on Android are actually PhoneGap apps. And again, the end user does not need to know. They are bigger. That's the only issue that I see with it. Like PhoneGap needs to be more modular to only really use the things that are necessary and not the whole 50 meg. But I think the solution that it brought and the learnings that we had from it is very, very important. So Cordova is Apache license as well. That's what I like about it as well. So it's a very good solution to get your HTML5 apps onto devices that are not really capable of HTML.
I think that web is moving from content to application using by HTML5.
That's what I said at the beginning of the
For the
talk.
content, we can generate so many contents in the web
Yes.
browser. But for the application, web application, we cannot generate web application and distribute web application in the web. We should work in native operating system. So what do you think about this?
I don't see that as a competition. I think there is the best apps that I've seen actually right now are hybrid apps that use, for example, buttons and scroll functionality that is native and use a web view or several web views to get the content in and out. Because that way you get the benefit of the distributed web and the simplicity of HTTP requests and APIs rather than a native layer for every different platform, and you still get the performance of the native app. I think there's a happy middle ground between native and with the web. And I think if an app is not there to do something with it and to generate content, why do you have an app? The amount of apps that I see that are just basically websites with a wrapper because people want to have an app instead of a website, that doesn't make sense. People will get bored of that very quickly because I don't know how many apps I have on my phone any longer. I can see in the near future that apps will become this consumable. I will just try it out and I will delete it after a while because I don't use it. People forget to delete them right now. That's why it still seems that people care. But to me, an app is, unless it's something that is really necessary and does something useful, to me it's just a new way of a CD-ROM. We made the web to distribute software without having to install and uninstall everything. And then now we make everything uninstallable and installable again. To me, it's kind of a step back. I gave a TED talk about this. And I think it's interesting that a lot of people, it shows as well. The apps that make the most money right now are enterprise apps, are applications that are used inside companies for company matters to create things for the company. So that, I would probably go native with that one as well, if I really if we really know the hardware that people are using. But most companies have now bring your own device as well. So I cannot force to use an iOS app, and I don't want to build an iOS, an Android, and another app. With an HTML5 app, I can support them all. So I think the way of seeing an app as something that is akin to our website is the wrong approach, because if an app just does show some content, why do you have an app? It's really not necessary, because you can make an installable web app really, really easy nowadays. Of course, the finding yourself in the App Store is a nice thing to have, but when you look at the economics behind it, how many people make money with that app that they spend so much money on, because to have it in the App Store, App Stores are not scaling. It's really hard to find and get listed in App Stores already. And the web, we managed to scale much more because we got good search engines for that. The search engines start indexing apps now as well, so that's going to be an interesting one. So I think there is a good middle ground in all of them. There are some things you can only do in native, and you should do in native. But the hybrid apps that I've seen lately, especially with Crossway as well, it's just a crosswalk is a very, very cool thing to do. Think about that when you build an app and you have the problem of the fidelity of a scroller just not being good enough. Use the scroller from the native app, but use the data layer. And to me, it goes back to good APIs. I mean, I'm a data API guy. I used to work on YQL, and I used to work on like REST APIs. And that's what really the important thing is. Where does your content come from, and how easy is it to convert it into different formats? If you write your content as an iOS app, and then there's no way to convert it to something else, I think this is 2015 almost. We should be cleverer than that. We should free our data and software rather than packaging them up in like little jars. Yeah. No, the point I was making is that most of these requests are actually abstraction libraries that we put in there. A lot of these things are, we use jQuery, we use Bootstrap, we use Foundation, we use these things because we don't even want to learn about HTML5 and the capabilities anymore. We build a lot of abstractions on abstraction on abstraction, and out of a sudden we have 100 requests. I've seen websites that include Dojo, YUI, jQuery because they liked one feature of each of those libraries. And that's just craziness. That doesn't make any sense. And then we do these gulp tasks and these kind of things to get back on that. So what I mean is that a lot of these resources are not necessary anymore. They're just there because HTML5 was not properly supported by old browsers. That's why we relied on them and we became dependent on them. And I think that's a very dangerous thing, especially seeing that even YUI, which was built by Yahoo for Yahoo, is now open sourced, or like farm source, as I call it. Oh, it's out in the farm with other APIs where it can play and it gets petted every day. It's like, if you can't rely on something, then don't put it in. And a lot of times we just put a lot of stuff in because we learn on the web this is what you need to do. And in a lot of cases we don't need to do it anymore because browsers moved on. Another big thing, of course, is images. People just don't understand that optimizing your images is giving you like 60% of your performance wins. And there's so many good things you can do. Like there's Image Optim, there's like PNG Crush. There's lots and lots of tools out there for you to use. And it's going to be interesting with HTTP too. Because HTTP2, everything becomes a binary stream. So instead of having to worry about like lots of resources, it's as fast as having like only one resource. So there's a big relearn coming. So hopefully that would help as well. But the point was the abstractions and the extra code that we put in because we want to fix something for something that doesn't even exist any longer is the problem that we have. Excellent. Thanks very much.